Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee left a trail of devastation across New York State. I saw firsthand the impact they left on our communities. Hundreds of families living in shelters, complete homes destroyed, belongings piled up on people's front yards, small businesses uncertain whether they would even reopen, worry about whether they could hire back their employees, farms who had no feed for livestock for days, crops and livelihoods vanishing without any trace in a single day, crumbling bridges, washed out roads, heating oil soaking into buildings and the ground. I was born and raised in upstate New York, and I can tell you we've never seen this kind of devastation, certainly not in my lifetime. America has always stood by those who have suffered greatly from disaster, and we have always helped them to rebuild. We have an obligation to these families, businesses, farmers, to help them rebuild today. This picture is of downtown Binghamton. I met with hundreds of families displaced and placed in a Red Cross shelter at the University of Binghamton. They were on day 4 at the shelter, unclear if they would be able to see what was left of their homes. I can't fully describe the worry and fear in the eyes of parents who are in a shelter with their children. I talked to one mother who has 10 children, the youngest of whom was 2 years old, trying desperately just to keep them fed, keep them safe, but literally having no sense of when she could return to her home and what it would look like when she returned. I talked to one father whose daughter turned 13 years old that day in the shelter, and his worry was mostly, I just don't know what's in front of us. I don't know when we'll be able to go home. I don't know how much has been destroyed, and I don't know how I will rebuild. One parent that I talked to was a young mother. She held a 6-week infant in her arms. And she just said to me, I have everything I need right here. And that really exemplified the courage of Americans when they fight through suffering, the strength of New Yorkers, that they will pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make the difference. But we here in Washington must help. In Schoharie County, the main street of the villages of both Schoharie and Middleburg, every single home was flooded. The water mark was about at 7 feet. And as you drive down the main street and you begin to talk to the business owners and the families, you can see there's not one that was left untouched. Every piece of these families' belongings are literally on the front lawns of these homes and businesses. But I watched these business owners begin to rebuild. I could see them literally bringing the mud from the basements, bringing the mud from their ground floors, pulling down all of the drywall because obviously the damage was so great it would cause long-lasting damage. And people are very worried about how they can make sure that their business is safe. This is just a snapshot right here of the town of Middleburg. Now, this is the farming community within Schoharie County. Now, these farmers have lost everything. I can tell you, the water was so strong, the surge was so great, it literally took trees out of the ground, completely uprooted and overturned. The crops that you could see on this farm, they were so covered with silt from the river, you couldn't even recognize what kind of crops they were. I saw potatoes that had been uprooted from the ground all over the road. That farmer could salvage nothing of their farm. We had one farmer who came down to meet with me because her cows were stranded. They had 800 cows stuck because the roads had been completely washed out. They had no way to get feed up to those cows. They had no way to deal with manure and dump all the milk that had to be destroyed. They needed a rescue effort. Because of the efforts of our governor, he reacted quickly. Our National Guard got up there, got food and water to those farmers. They fixed the road. The feed was delivered. But this is the kind of reaction we need from government. This is why the federal government must be there to help and protect these families and businesses. Our next picture is of Greene County. Now, Greene County, waters rushed down the Main Street. This is a picture of Wyndham, and destroying all businesses in its wake, families, homes, absolute destruction throughout Greene County. And I talked to just one business owner, and she had a business for children's clothing, children's needs, children's toys. She has just a couple employees, but she said, I have nothing to rebuild. I have no way that I can rebuild my business. I don't think I could rehire those employees. So the feeling of hopelessness and worry and dread and concern, on top of a very tough economy anyway, these are the businesses and families and farmers that we need to help, because we need them to rebuild. We need them to have the ability to hire those employees back, to produce food for our families, to make sure we have thriving communities once again. The last picture I want to show is of Keene, up in the North Country. In Keene, the river rose 22 feet above the flood stage, washing out roads and bridges, and left much of the town actually stranded for days. Half of the town's firehouse was ripped apart and swept away by the river. And up in the high peaks, the rain came down so hard that it brought huge chunks of the mountainside with it, creating slides that have changed the face of the Adirondacks for generations. As you can see, this is just 4 communities. Throughout New York State, the North Country, the Capital Region, the Mohawk Valley, Hudson Valley, Southern Tier, Long Island, no one can question the absolute devastation that these storms have left our communities. We must stand with them in their greatest time of need. Federal assistance is essential to help these families, these farmers, these businesses, and communities not only recover, but rebuild and be stronger than they were before. We need immediate funding for FEMA and the USDA disaster assistance to provide relief for these communities all across New York and all of the other states that were affected by these storms.